So we're having today a PC Engine GT. This is the handheld PC Engine. It's already been to a previous repair shop that couldn't get it working. So we've received it. It's come in bits, which is not that much of a problem. It saves us stripping it down. But let's just take a look at what the previous repair shop has possibly done and get this thing back up and running. This is how we've received the console. Pretty much just all the loose parts. So the first thing to do is separate what we don't need. We'll just move the front screen out of the way. The LCD we don't need as such. I've got a working one, and we'll test probably audio first anyway. Here's the main motherboard that we care about. So that's probably all we need anyway right now. The back case with the port on the side and the battery terminals we don't need. We've got the front board, which we don't need. We can bypass by bridging 2 pins on this ribbon to turn on the backlight. The metal cage, the bracket, all the rubbers and buttons. So it looks like we have everything we need. There's a cap kit. We won't be using that. I always use my own, so I know the good quality and work. So let's just ignore that. And the customer's sent a Hue card. So being sent in parts has actually saved us the strip down time. We can now just start focusing on this motherboard, which is actually quite destroyed. So we're missing, I think that's one of the inductors there. We've got some pretty severe damage here. I think it's maybe had an attempted recap with, oh yeah, torn pads and not much success. Got a floating cap here. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is remove all of the caps, because definitely had a recap that's not been done great, and let's start from there. And with all the old caps off, let's just take a look. This is much worse than I originally thought. So I've desolder wicked the pads. I haven't cleaned the areas up yet, but let's just take a look what we're already looking at. We've got torn traces here and here. A big problem here is the chip has been snapped, so 2 pins are physically disconnected. So we're gonna have to grind back this silicon and try and reattach to the bonding inside the chip. We have, I noticed, capacitors knocked here. I'm pretty sure a resistor missing here. The wheels are melted. We have another 2 dodgy traces here that are floating. Down at the bottom where this cap's been put on, these 3 pins are lifted and this is all melted here, but hopefully that can just be stuck back down. So there's a lot of work to do here straight away already. So let me just warm up this board, clean it all up and repair any bad traces to start with. And with that all warmed up and cleaned everywhere now, I've put those 2 caps back. I'll just double check if we need a resistor there. We can at least get a clear view. I've restored those 3 pins. What I'm going to do is recap each pad as I go, and as I find broken traces like this, restore them to at least get the capacitors now back on. And that's all the recap now done. I've used ceramics because we can on the PC Engine GT when you know what you're doing. And bridged the AL900 inductor, which isn't needed, it's for noise suppression, and it was missing when we inspected this, so that's bridged. Next up, I think we will test the fuse. Fuse is okay. That's the big backlight transformer that's okay. And if you're wondering, all of this is on the wiki as usual, PC Engine GT, and I have all the details for the backlight circuit, which we just checked the transformer off. If we go to now the LCD circuit, this is for the contrast of the LCD. We'll check this transformer, which is this one here. So these 3, these 3 should connect, and there's nothing. So that's the contrast circuit that won't work. And unfortunately, these transformers, there is no alternative yet on the market. So that will mean that the customer can't get the contrast on the original LCD working, but we could possibly offer an IPS screen upgrade. So let's just factor that in at the moment, that the original screen won't work. I just noticed I missed off CC901, so just chuck that on. Next, I think we need to tackle this chip, because if we can't get these pins reattached internally, we have not only a non-functional original contrast circuit, we'll have a dead chip here, and we're starting to look at some expensive donors from PC Engines and an IPS upgrade. For this repair, what we need to do is take a grinding tool, and we need to slowly grind away the black silicone. It's basically a silicone epoxy on this chip until we get down to some gold pads. And with enough of that epoxy ground away, we can now see these two traces internal to the chip. For this kind of repair, I'm going to use this really thin silver wire, which is 0.05 millimeter. So about as thin as you can really solder. The first step is to apply some fresh solder. Let's just remove these legs as well that are in the way. Because the legs are broken, we're just going to use wire. Next, we'll flux the internal bonding pads on the die. And we'll try and get some solder on them, which we've done nice and easily. And the final step is to take this super thin wire, solder it onto the bond, use tweezers to position this wire down here, probably use a tiny bit more flux, get that wire nicely on, and just tug off the excess. If we clean up very gently, because this wire will snap if you clean too vigorously, you can now see we have that repaired. I'll just repeat that for the other one, and that's that restored. The final step is to use some UV solder mask to fill in and cure the area by these bond wires, just so they can't become detached as easy. And that's now firm to the touch, so rock hard, and that wire isn't going to go anywhere. Powering up from the 9-volt side with 6 volts does not regulate to 5 volts, so the circuit that generates the 5 volts is also dead. We'll bypass that for now and just inject 5 volts straight here and just listen for game load audio. I'll try my game first because I know these games work, and turn on power. And we've got about the correct power draw, but no audio. So next up, let's just reflow these 3 chips because we need these 3 and power to really start getting audio. And with all them reflown, we get about the same. And my suspicion is going to be this cable. Let's just give it a good clean with IPA, because this was heavily damaged and pins lifted here before, and it's also melted. This is where the game loads its data through, so let's see if that's done anything different. And we can see even pressing on this ribbon causes different behaviour. So you can see there, just holding that ribbon in a very specific place has allowed this to work. Now, the volume control doesn't work, so it's full volume all the time. But you can see, that means this chip's working, most of the console's working. However, the customer's now used way more than the current time on the repair. So what we need to do is report back to the customer. They will need a new front board, which again is a donor. They're going to need a new transformer at minimum that may not fix the contrast circuit. So we need 2 parts that can only come off donors. Otherwise, this is effectively non-functional. I could just get a ribbon here or hand wire with enamel wire. There's an option there. The audio doesn't fully work because the wheel doesn't work. It's also got a melted wheel. So there's a ton of issues still with this, and it's whether the customer wants to pay to continue diagnostics. And obviously the 5-volt circuit doesn't work either. So there's an absolute ton that needs to go into finishing this up to get it working. But hopefully you guys learned something from this. You can see how far we've got with the diagnostics, and let's see if the customer continues with this repair or not.